Hello horror fans and welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos, where I just wanted to say before we jump on into our usual horrifying diatribe, thank you all to our recent subscribers and dedicated steadfast fans of all things horror. Anyway, as always, I'll be your host Jack Finch, as today we fire up the dusty old projector and peer through the pulpit as we take a look at the top 5 scary movies you need to pray before watching. Be it the Buddha, Yahweh, Allah, Odin, Brahma, or the omnipotent presence of the universe itself, there are some horror movies out there with such demonic tones that you need to say a prayer or two just to get through them. Well, let's take a look. Kicking off at number 5, The Hallow. As you may know, I'm a huge proponent for British horror, mainly because the only thing we've really got to do over there is look out at a grey sky through a rainy window, and, well, it makes for some pretty terrifying horror cinema. No more so than in 2016's The Hallow, written and directed by Corin Hardy, the man recently responsible for The Nun. Also, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, then this film stars both Joseph Maul, aka Benjen Stark, and Michael McElhatton, aka the brilliantly morose Roose Bolton. Great stuff. The Hallow plays out as a folklore tale of old, a family from the city, a newborn baby, and a malevolent creature out in the deep dark wood with strange twisted intentions. It's also a breath of fresh air from the cookie cutter creature feature that we see in modern cinema, and the departure from full-blown CGI, with instead using old school practical effects, make for some terrifying on-screen moments, bringing creatures from Irish folklore to a nightmarish reality. It's great, give it a watch. Coming in at number 4, The Omen. Geez, this film. Admittedly, as I get older, the impact of The Omen becomes less and less, but there's no denying that Damien Thorne, aka the Antichrist himself, is one of the most demonically fear-inducing kids to have ever stepped on screen, and the first time you see his twisty little smile is something that you'll never forget. Here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Pretty metal, right? Well, in essence, that's what Richard Donner's 1976 on-screen demonic onslaught really is. It's a religiously charged, meandering tale that drags us along through the hallways of hell on earth. Now, I'm talking of the wider franchise in this case because the original film starring Gregory Peck is a much more subtle and creepingly quiet beast. The strange, spacious audio track, the wide lingering shots, and an absolutely terrifying performance from a 4-year-old boy, Harvey Spencer Stevens. I wouldn't necessarily advocate saying a prayer before you watch this film, but I wouldn't tell you not to either. Swinging in at number 3, The Wailing. Oh man, is this film good. South Korean cinema just can't seem to make a bad horror film, and at the top of that pile is The Wailing, written and directed by Na Hong Jin. In essence, this film is about spiritual belief and the inner conflict of the soul. It weaves differing, competing threads of spiritualism throughout, shamanism, ritualistic sacrifice, and even Christianity. Boiled down further, good and evil, angels and demons, which one ends up on top? Well, if you watch the film, you'll find an answer of your own. What you will find, though, is an occult masterpiece into the weird world of Korean folklore. This film does a pretty stand-up job at keeping you on edge throughout its lengthy 2.5-hour runtime, feeding you tiny scraps of narrative right up until the very end. Also, we haven't even talked about the murder, demon, zombies, or the exorcism, or the cave scene. Yeah, I really don't want to ruin this film for you if you haven't seen it, but take it from me, it's worth the nightmares. Coming in next at number 2, The Babadook.
If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook.
Are you terrified of creepy shadow monsters that lurk behind your wardrobe door? Then please sit down in a dark room and watch The Babadook, a 2014 Australian psychological creature feature from Jennifer Kent. I say creature feature in the loosest sense because, guys, seriously, what the hell is The Babadook? I still don't know, and it's got me pretty shook. That, in essence, is the success of this film though, the fear of the unknown, the strange, otherworldly sense that you get as a child trying to fall asleep in a bleak, unfamiliar house. It blends the supernatural with the surreal, with a pinch of native Australian folklore to boot. Plus also, if you're a fan of the kid fighting back against the monster, then you'll be thrilled at 6-year-old Samuel, played by Noah Wiseman, who absolutely steals the show. I appreciate that people have tried to find further meaning in this film's plot, its ending in particular, and while I think that there are wider cinematic elements that tie this film's plot together, without all of that, it's just a gut-wrenching, knees-weak, palms-sweaty kind of horror movie. You know, the best kind. It's a suspenseful, slightly off story about confronting the darkness that lies within. And finally, at our number 1 spot, The Witch. You know what? I get it if you don't like this film. I understand the criticism that it received, but let me tell you, you're wrong, because this film is possibly the most unnervingly, unexplainably, brilliantly strange piece of horror cinema of recent times. It ticks every box on my list, and I'll tell you why. This film is impossibly bleak. It plays like something forbidden, something that we just shouldn't be watching, a glimpse into the long forgotten world where the devil still reigns. It begins with the banishment of a New England family in the 16th century, where we briefly get a glimpse of colonial era society and a newly found North America, but that world is soon shut off, and all we're left with is the woods and the witch. Seriously, this film does so much with so little that it's testament to Robert Eggers, the director and writer, as this was his first debut film, and he's fastly becoming my favourite horror filmmaker, so keep your eye out on him. Again, I really don't want to spoil this film for you, but if you laugh at the idea of being terrified of a goat, then let me introduce you to Black Phillip.
Remove thy shift.
Kicking off at number 5, The People Under the Stairs.
In the wall, doing his business, God knows where. You kids will be the death of me.
Damn straight, this film absolutely terrified me as a young little horror fan, and most of the terror lies within the film's twisted plot. It's a thought that burrows into your head and keeps you wide awake at night. You never know who lives next door, eh? The People Under the Stairs, released in 1991, was written and directed by horror aficionado Wes Craven, the same mastermind that brought us classics such as Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now listen, I understand, this film might seem a little weak sauce, but seriously, watch this film alone at night, let it sink in after a while, and look out across your neighbourhood and tell me you don't feel that creepy sense of dread. It involves a young kid named Fool, played by the awesome Brandon Adams, who finds himself upon the strange, twisted house of the Robesons during a planned robbery. Well, they get a little bit more than what they bargained for, put it that way. Cannibals, incest, bodies in the wall, the psychological fear of deranged parents. This cult classic is definitely one to hit on your list, and the special effects, while dated now, are the stuff of horror nightmare nostalgia. Next up at number 4, The Loved Ones.
He's probably dead by now.
Sensing a theme here? Yeah, I'm not saying this list is influenced by my own internal fears, but I'm also definitely saying that. The Loved Ones is a relatively unknown 2009 Australian horror film written and directed by Sean Byrne, who also recently delivered us The Devil's Candy, a fantastic horror film with a relatively unknown cast that deserves more acclaim. When I say that The Loved One is genuinely terrifying, I really mean it, because somewhere out there is someone not so far removed from Lola and her dad. And that spells true terror. It's a basic premise, but where it does deliver are in its small, horrific moments of well-timed violent gore and psychological back and forths. It stars Xavier Samuel as Brent, a high school teen who tragically lost his father, and Robin McLeavy, who has a father but is messed the hell up. Both of who are actors who absolutely nail their roles and deliver some of the best indie horror performances that I've seen in recent years. Put it this way, imagine if Carrie and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre had a baby, then you'd get this film. Damn, I really don't want to ruin anything for you guys, but seriously, watch this film if you haven't. Now coming in at number 3, Martyrs.
Regardez ses yeux. Celle-ci a été battue par son mari. Crise de jalousie, une démence imprévisible. Celle-là vient de passer 9 heures dans la carcasse de sa voiture. Cette jeune leucémie qui vit ses derniers instants.
Again, the same with Wreck, which we covered in another recent video. Please watch the original French language version of this film and not the trashy 2015 remake. I'm all for a good remake, but that was just plain terrible. Anyway, Martyrs is a French psychological horror film released back in 2008 and written and directed by Pascal Laugier, who unfortunately hasn't seemed to hit the mark since this titan of horror cinema was released. Seriously, I'd go so far as to say this is the scariest psychological thriller released this century. If that's not worth a watch, then I don't know what is. Martyrs covers some pretty serious ground and is incredibly unforgiving in its subject matter. It was also heralded as the most divisive film to screen at the Cannes Film Festival in the year that it premiered, indicating to audiences that they would either love it or be absolutely horrified. Again, I don't want to ruin a lot for you guys simply because if you haven't seen it, I don't want to take anything away of that awful, creeping sense of dread. This film gnaws at you all the way up until the end, where one of the most insanely horrifying reveals of horror cinema takes place. Give it a go. You'll soon find out what I mean. Swinging in at our number 2 spot, Funny Games. Now, this is also another moment where I talk about remakes because there's a small twist to this reveal, because I actually don't mind which version of this film you watch. In fact, watch both and enjoy them both equally because they're both fantastic, different examples of horror cinema in their own right. Both versions of the film are written and directed by the same person, and I'm fine with that. Personally, I enjoy the 2007 American remake purely because Michael Pitt is a colossus of horror. Originally released in Austrian in 1997 and written and directed by the awesome Michael Haneke, Funny Games is a psychological thriller that pits a family against 2 young psychopaths. Stylistically speaking, this film is an absolute pleasure to watch, which adds to that strange feeling that the film inhabits. Things may look nice on the surface, but deep below, some terrifying stuff is happening. The plot involves 2 young men holding a wealthy family hostage in their own summer home while torturing them and playing sadistic, funny games. This film also deals with the audience in an interesting way, suggesting that we're almost complicit with their actions, subverting the genre in a way that horror cinema rarely pulls off. One of my favourite films of all time, go ahead and give it a watch. And finally, at our number 1 spot, I Saw the Devil. Really, I did, because I saw this film. Because talking about subverting horror cinema, then like with most other things, South Korean cinema does it again. In 2010's I Saw the Devil. This film is absolutely terrifying for many reasons, but for one reason above all, it puts you in the shoes of the killer. And it's a strange place to be. Directed by Kim Ji-woon, I Saw the Devil is the tale of a special detective as he embarks on the quest to avenge the death of his murdered wife at the hands of a brutal serial killer. And strangely enough, the film offers up enough space for us to begin to empathise with the killer, questioning the very integrity of the human mind. Don't tread into this film lightly because there is some seriously handled violent content that may take you unaware, and some absolutely breathtaking special effects, really breathtaking, that give you that classic holy shit, what the hell did we just watch moment. It's a fantastic horror film and a testament to just exactly what the genre can do under the correct circumstances. Give it a watch, you won't be disappointed. Kicking off at our number 5 spot, Get Out.
No.
And I've been biding my precious time before putting this film into this series because I hope that it doesn't go without saying this film is one of the greatest pieces of cinema to creep up on the horror genre in over a decade. I don't say this lightly, it's fantastic, and Jordan Peele is a genius. If you haven't seen it, please stop what you're doing right now and go and watch it. After hitting our screens in 2017, Jordan Peele's directorial debut took critics by storm as a well-timed and fresh new take on the psychological horror genre. In essence, it's a very simple plot. It focuses on a black man who uncovers a disturbing secret when he meets the family of his white girlfriend. It pulls no punches in its very deliberate manner, and as the slow facade of what appears to be a psychological thriller gets pulled back, the true terror of what lies beneath is revealed. Daniel Kaluuya, who plays the lead character Chris, absolutely knocks this role out of the park. I've been a fan of his since his time at Skins, a show that aired in Britain way back when in 2000. 2007. What's up, Posh Kenneth? If this film has done anything other than being just a damn good horror flick, it's paved the way for Jordan Peele to completely flip the industry on its head. And if the rumours about his newest film are true, Us, which is planned to be released in 2019, then I think we're witnessing the emergence of a true horror legend. Let's hope, eh? Swinging in at number 4, Mum and Dad. It really pains me to put this film on this list. It really does, because it's messed up. But like I said in the intro, you guys just keep up in the ante. What do you expect? Also, this will be the first of 2 British indie horror films to make this list. Can you guess which is next? I'll give you 10 points if you do. What am I talking about? I don't know. I'm just really trying to avoid talking about this film because honestly guys, it's messed up. I'm warning you. Also, don't get this film confused with Nicolas Cage's Mum and Dad because you'll be in for a real surprise. Released in 2008, it was the directorial debut for Stephen Shield, who has kind of gone under the radar since but actually makes some fantastic horror. It's very, very easy to chalk this film off as just another product of the gore porn overhype of recent years, but while yes, it very much is that, there's also so much more to this film, and that's down to some standout performances from Perry Benson and Dido Miles, who play Dad and Mum respectively. Going into this film knowing nothing about it is probably the best course of action, and you will probably have the exact same reaction as I did and still do to this day. Don't say I didn't warn you. And next up at our number 3 spot, Creep. The second part of our British indie horror back-to-back, and it's down to you to decide which one is scarier, but for me, it's Creep. No, not the 2015 movie of the same name by Mark Duplass, which is actually really damn good, but the 2005 British creature feature from Christopher Smith, the man responsible for both Severance, which is awesome, and Triangle, which, it's still pretty good. Give them a try. I'm not sure whether it's because I watched this movie constantly as a teenager, showing it to the newest friend just to watch their reaction, but Creep is a seriously well-made horror, which it makes it even crazier that this film received absolutely scathing reviews, because in all honesty, I'm not sure why. It's everything you want in a horror B movie. It has a simple plot with a simple function, it has a dynamic and responsive cast, and the creature, the creep, well, I'll let you see for yourself. Also, our final girl, Kate, played by Franca Potent, is a welcome spin on the usual stereotype that carries the film naturally on its course. It's well paced, it's got an equally eerie score, and it will make you think twice the next time you head into a subway. Give it a look-see. Coming in next at our number 2 spot, The Devil's Backbone. And I will give this film the credit it deserves because it's brilliant in every right. Really, not just as a horror film but as a piece of cinema. And while it may not be the style of horror we're more commonly used to, it offers something more. It's almost gothic in its scale, almost more akin to Turn of the Screw than it is to Friday the 13th. Released in 2001, it was the 3rd film in Guillermo del Toro's repertoire and probably one of his best films to date. It was also independently produced by Pedro Almodovar, the man that brought us The Skin I Live In, so the pedigree is pretty high. Also, I'd just like to clearly state that any of Del Toro's horror works could make this list, particularly The Orphanage and Mama, but this one's just my favourite. The Devil's Backbone manages to weave several threads codependently, all of which come together towards the film's horrifying end. Like with most of the points on this list, I don't want to spoil anything for you if you haven't seen it, but the key to remember when watching this film is its atmosphere. Every lingering shot, every slow pan is crammed with the creepy, slow sense of dread surrounding not only the orphanage that it takes place in, but the wider backdrop of the Spanish Civil War and the ghosts that continue to haunt the past. Really, a fantastic piece of horror cinema. Give it a watch. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Antichrist. Oh, Lars von Trier, where do I even begin with you, dude? Honestly, I don't even know how to begin with this film, so I'll try and start with its origin. Lars von Trier, perhaps Denmark's most prolific and controversial filmmaker of all time, wrote the synopsis for this film after he'd been hospitalized for a significant manic depressive episode, and is largely influenced by his own struggles with anxiety and depression. And that's really the only place that we can jump off when trying to discuss this film, because otherwise it just becomes a complete and utter horror show of the grotesque and otherwise unholy, and I guess we as an audience would be missing the point. Released in 2009, Antichrist deals with some very horrific issues, interwoven with idioms and metaphors from religion and folklore in an attempt to explain the unexplainable, the way that the human brain deals with itself. It's incredibly violent, it's incredibly disturbing, and it's possibly the most insightful psychological horror film ever made. I don't say that lightly. Still, even after saying all that, I still don't know how to begin talking about this film, so I guess you'll just have to watch it.